Hey y'all! Today we are doing the second part of 0.3, which is looking at word problems. So we have some tips at the top here for you to follow. They're not necessarily rules. I'm not grading you on following these steps, but it just helps us to be successful. So especially if your first reaction is, oh no, I'm so bad at word problems, you really need to be doing these steps. Okay, so step number one is take notes. And a lot of times taking notes is going to kind of set up the whole problem for you. So looking at example one, what I mean by that, the product of 7 and a number. Well, I already have a note to take. The product means multiply, of 7 and a number, 7 and I don't know what a number is, so I'm going to use n. We could use anything. We could use X. We could use a question mark, although I don't really recommend that. But what is important is maybe I end up with a second number that we're talking about in this problem. So I just need to remember that I've used n for this number. And that kind of goes to the number 2 tip. Define all of your variables. If you want to, you could write that out to the side. N equals a number. But really what I did up here is sufficient. I put an n right next to the word a number so I can keep track of what does n even mean. So that way at the end of the question, I can make sure that when I've solved for n, does that actually answer the question that they were asking, whatever I used for n. So product of 7 and a number, we're good to go. Okay, so the product of 7 and a number increased by 3. Okay, well increasing by 3 means adding 3 is equal to, well, I know how to write that down. So all I'm doing, I like to think of this as jotting down notes. I haven't read the whole problem yet. I'm just jotting down information that I come across. Is equal to twice the number. Okay, well, I'm using n for that number. So twice the number would be 2n. Subtracted from 39. Okay, so I've run into my first mistake by taking notes, and this is just where we need to be careful. It says that this 2n is subtracted from 39. Okay, which means I need to rewrite this. I was taking notes, but let's go ahead and move my work on over here and update it. We have 7n plus 3, but now I need to rewrite this as 39 minus 2n. And don't be afraid of making mistakes like this. You just have to recognize once you've made the mistake, how do I fix it? Or really it wasn't a mistake at the time, but how do I update these notes that I've taken? Okay, so now the question is, what is the number? Which means all I have to do is solve for n, which goes back to yesterday's lesson. So remember that I like to rewrite the problem if I'm starting a new line. Again, so I just don't make any mistakes with negatives or miscopying numbers or using the wrong numbers or something. N equals 4. So there we go. Looks like that is my solution. Boop. Okay, let's try the same strategy in the next problem. 5 less than, okay, so for taking notes, 5 less than is always going to be a minus 5. So I'm going to do something, and I'm going to leave that note there. I'm going to do something minus 5. Then twice a number, okay, so twice a number, n. So now I have 2n minus 5 is equal to 1/2 the difference of, so 1/2 of two things that I'm gonna be subtracting. And I have to subtract those first, right? Because it says half the difference, meaning I need to subtract them and then do half of that. So what am I subtracting? The difference of 3 times the number and 13. Find the number. Okay, and going back to my tips, it says circle what they're asking you to find, right? So really we should be circling find the number. Really the only time that I am like, okay, you absolutely must circle the question is when the question is kind of like yesterday's notes, where the question was something other than just solving for x. It's a good reminder that there's something different that I need to do rather than just figure out what does n or x equal. So on these two, it's pretty straightforward. I know I'm just solving for n. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and multiply everything by 2 and distribute that on the left-hand side here. Going to subtract 3n. And here's where, just depending on how comfortable you are, but you might start making mistakes if you do too much at once. I know I'm going to subtract this 3n. I also know I'm going to end up moving this 10, so maybe I'll do that right now. I'm going to do them both at once. Because now I end up with 4n minus 3n is just n. Minus 10 and plus 10 is 0 equals 3n minus 3n, 0. Negative 13 plus 10 is minus 3. There we go. The length of a rectangle. Okay, great. This was not in the tips up top, but a great idea for ACT and SAT especially. Whenever you see it talking about a rectangle or a triangle, draw it. Here's a rectangle. It's talking about the length of a rectangle is 1 more than 4 times the width, so maybe I'm going to label these L and W, so that's defining my variables. Okay, and now I'll start taking notes. The length is 1 more than, so that's going to be a plus 1, 4 times the width. So 4 times the width plus 1. Okay, if the perimeter is 2 times the length plus 2 times the width, right? It's the whole distance around the rectangle, is 62 meters. Okay, so I know that the perimeter equals 62. 62 equals 2 times the length plus 2 times the width. Find the dimensions. Okay, this is definitely one I'm going to circle. I'm not just solving for one of them. I need to know both the length and the width. Okay, so when we have two variables, right? I have L and W. We have a couple options. We can do a system of equations, if you remember that back from Algebra 1. Actually that's kind of what we're doing regardless. You can use elimination, if you remember that from Algebra 1. But most of these word problems are going to make it pretty easy to use substitution. So if I see that L equals 4W plus 1, I can go ahead and in my perimeter equation over here, instead of writing the L, I can replace it with 4W plus 1. So let's go ahead and do that. 62 equals 2 times 4W plus 1 plus 2W. And now it becomes exactly like a problem from yesterday. And that's the nice thing. If you practice just setting up the word problem and being careful to remember what the question was, as soon as you set it up, you can pretend like it's not a word problem at all. You can just solve it like a normal equation. So if we go through this, I would distribute the 2. I'm going to do something kind of weird that I don't normally do. I'm going to start moving my work to the left here because I'm out of room to the right. 62 equals 10W plus 2. 60 equals 10W. So the width is 6, but we also need to be careful. That's not my final answer. I need to remember it asked for the dimensions. So the width is 6. The length is, so we're turning back to here again. The length is 4 times the width plus 1. So then I end up with the length is 4 times 6 is 24, plus 1 is 25. I just plugged in, I guess I can write that down. 4 times 6 plus 1, right? I used my answer for width to figure out the length, and there's my solution. Okay, example 4, the measure of one angle is, so the measure of one angle, I don't know what that is, so let's call it M for measure maybe, measure of one angle. You could use A for angle, you could use X, because we normally use X for variables. So the measure of one angle is 6 more than, so plus 6 half the measure of another. So 1/2, but I need another angle. So maybe since I used M, I'll use N for this one. So half of N, and then 6 more than that, plus 6. If the angles are complementary, okay, so complementary angles add up to 90 degrees. So M plus N needs to be 90 degrees, the sum of those two angles. Okay, and just like in the last problem, I can use substitution. I don't like two variables, so instead of M, I can go ahead and replace it with 1/2 N plus 6, and then I'm going to copy down the rest of the problem here, so I have plus N equals 90. Maybe I don't like dealing with that fraction, so I can multiply everything by 2. N plus 12 plus 2N equals 180. If you don't mind working with fractions, especially since you have your calculator, you could have left the fraction. You can just do 1/2 N plus N is going to be 3/2 N. And that's fine too. I end up with 3N plus 12 equals 180. Subtract 12 from both sides. Subtract 12 from both sides, and we end up with 168. Divide both sides by 3, and we end up with 556. Let's look at my question. Find both measures. Okay, so just N is not sufficient. I need to find both of them, meaning I need to come back here and do M equals half of 56 plus 6. You can type that all in your calculator. I still do not have mine, so let's see, 28 plus 6 is going to be 34. So I'm going to go ahead and move that over here. And M equals 34 degrees. And there is my full solution. Boop. Guess on some highlighting answers. Okay, Kelly, Laura, and Tia sold boxes of cookies for a fundraiser. Kelly sold 15 boxes less than Laura. Okay, so it looks like I need 3 variables. It looks like I have Kelly, Laura, and Tia, which are Kelly, Laura, and Tia. It looks like I'm talking about the number of boxes. So Kelly, Laura, and Tia, number of boxes. Okay, just so I can kind of keep track of what those mean. Okay, so taking notes. Kelly sold, I guess I can't zoom in. Kelly sold, so she equals 15 less than Laura. So that's going to be Laura minus 15. Okay, Tia sold twice as many as Kelly. Okay, so Tia's is twice of Kelly. If they sold 83 boxes in total, so if I add them all up, how many boxes did each girl sell? Okay, so we have 3 variables this time, but I want to use the same strategy. I'm still just trying to get it down to 1. So if we look at all 3 of these equations, they all have a K in them. So that's probably what I want to do. I want all of these to be K's, meaning I need to replace the L with something and I need to replace the T with something. Well, the T is pretty easy. The T equals 2K, and, I think, nope, it's just not doing what I wanted it to. There we go. Okay. Let's try to move this down. Boop, there we go. Okay, so I have K plus, I'm going to leave a blank space. I don't know what L is yet, but the T is pretty easy. 2K equals 83. Okay, I need to figure out what L equals. Well, I can go ahead and just add 15 to both sides. And that helps me isolate L. That's why we practiced those literal equations in that previous lesson. Okay, now I can go ahead and replace the L. The L is K plus 15. K plus 15. And then I just solve it like a normal equation. Now that I just have one variable left, 2, 3, I have 4 Ks. Plus 15 is 83. Divide both sides by 4. So Kelly sold 17 boxes. And returning, it asks how many boxes did each girl sell. So I'm not just trying to figure out Kelly. I'm trying to find out Laura and Tia too. So I can go ahead and use these two equations over here. And I know that Kelly sold 15. So I'm going to go ahead and make a little column for my answers. Know that Kelly sold, I'm sorry, did I say 15? I meant 17. I was looking at that 15 right there. Kelly sold 17. So then I have to add 15 to that for Laura. So Laura equals 32, I believe. And then Tia is 2 times that. So Tia is going to be 34. There we go. And normally I would not let my work look like this. We're just kind of limited on space so we can fit all the notes onto one page, front and back. Okay, example 6, the measure of the vertex of an angle in isosceles triangle. So let's draw the isosceles triangle. Okay, the measure of the vertex angle, so let's call that X, or I guess V for vertex, but I just chose X. So X is 6 less than, so I'm going to have a minus 6, 4 times the measure of a base angle, so I'll use B for base, 4 times B, and since it's isosceles, right, those are both the same, so just 4 times either of the bases, 4 times the base, and I have to do minus 6. Find the measure of the vertex. Okay, well this one's weird because I have 2 variables, which I've had in the last 3 examples, but I also had multiple equations. So we have to think, what else do we know about a triangle? We know that a triangle, the angles should add up to 180. So I end up with X plus B equals 180. And it does not matter which equation you plug into. Just as long as we have 2 equations, we're just trying to get down to 1 variable. So I'm going to choose, since this is already just an X equals something, I'm going to plug it in for this X and solve this equation equaling 180. So we end up with 4B, let me zoom in so my handwriting looks better. 4B minus 6 plus B plus B equals 180. 6B minus 6 equals 180. 6B equals 186. And divide both sides by 6, and we get that a base angle is 31 degrees. Was that the question? Find the measure of the vertex angle. Okay, well I figured out the base angle, but I can use that. Vertex is 4 times 31 minus 6, which you can use your calculator for, and we should end up with 118 degrees. Woohoo! Okay. So these next three problems are a very common type of ACT problem, which are consecutive integer problems. Okay, consecutive integer problems. And the setup is always going to be the same for consecutive integer, or similar for consecutive integer problems. I like to start with, I always use x. So x is the smallest, and I'm just going to put smallest number. Okay, and depending on how many integers, right? Integers are positive and negative counting numbers. Okay, so in order to get from the smallest number to the next smallest number, if I'm just counting up consecutive integers, so like if the answer is like 2 is the smallest integer, well, the next integer is 3. So to get from 2 to 3, I just add 1. So the next number is just going to be x plus 1 is going to be the next number. Okay, and then to get the next number, I'm going to add 1 again. So I'm going to take the smallest number and I'm going to add 2. So again, if 2 was the smallest number, which that's not the answer, but if it was 2 and then 3 and then 4, 4 is 2 plus 2, right? So this is going to be the third number. And for the most part, if it's just consecutive integers, it's always going to be this. You just do as many numbers as you need that it describes in the problem. So for consecutive integers, I have my basically the 4 representations of my number. Here's number 1, number 2, number 3, and number 4 in the list. Okay, so it says the sum, which means I'm adding those all together, is 222. Find the integers. Okay, so I'm going to add all of those representations of the numbers together, set it equal to 222. So I have x plus, the next number is x plus 1 plus x plus 2 plus x plus 3. There's my 1, 2, 3, 4 numbers, and the sum of those numbers is 222. 1, 2, 3, there's 4 x's. 4x plus 6 equals 222. 4x equals 216. X equals 54. And let's read the question. Find the integers. So I need to find all of them. Okay, so if x we said was the smallest number, so then if they're consecutive integers, my numbers are 54, 55, 56, and 57. Okay, so again, I have a consecutive integer problem. 3 consecutive, but now they're only odd integers. Well, the setup starts the same. X is always going to be your smallest number. Doesn't have to be, there's other ways to solve this, but I like doing it the same way every time. Okay, but it says that my integers are odd this time. They're still allowed to be negative, but they have to be odd. So maybe my smallest number is a 7. I have to think about how far away is the next odd integer. So if the smallest number is 7, the next number is going to be 9. And that's 2 away. So my next number, since it has to be odd, is actually going to be 2 away from x. So that's going to be my next number, which means that there's only 3 this time. My last number or you could say biggest number, or you could say third number, it doesn't really matter. But that's going to be x plus 4. Okay, so again, the sum of these is 93. Find the middle. Okay, so I'm just looking for the middle number, but I'd probably have to just solve for x first anyways. So let's do that. Add them all together. The sum is 93. 3x plus 6 equals 93. 3x equals 87, which means x is 29. So if 29 is my smallest number, and this is why it's so important to circle the actual question, the answer is not 29. It's the middle number, which is the next odd number, which is 31. Okay, find 3 consecutive integers. So again, 3 consecutive, it does not say even, it does not say odd, it's just 3 integers. So x is going to be the smallest. X plus 1 is going to be the next integer, is going to be next number, and x plus 2 is going to be the last. Okay, such that the sum of the smallest and twice the median. Okay, so the smallest integer, the sum of the smallest, so x plus, because sum means add, twice the median, so 2 times, we need to make sure we put that middle one in parentheses, x plus 1, because we need to multiply it by that whole representation of that number, is 20 more than, so I'm going to have a plus 20, the largest. So I'm going to take the largest and add 20. Alrighty, let's see what we end up with. Distribute, combine like terms, combine like terms. I moved both things at once. I subtracted the x over to the left, then I subtracted the 2 over to the right, and we end up with x equals 10. What's the question? Find 3 consecutive integers. Okay, so the answer is going to be 10, 11, 12. And I actually really like those problems. I think they're a lot of fun. Okay, and some ACT, SAT practice. Rectangle A, I love to draw. Oh, let's not draw with my highlighter though. Rectangle A has a length of 64 inches, boop, and let's label this A, and a width of 48. Okay, rectangle B has a length and width. It says that it's larger, right? So maybe let's draw this a little bit bigger. B, that are both 3/4 times the length and the width of rectangle A. Okay, so I just need to do times 3/4, and then I guess there's a width, so times 3/4, and we can use our calculator for that. And I believe we end up with 48. Oh, did it even say larger? That's definitely not larger. Did I make that up? Rectangle B has a length and width that are both 3/4 times the length and the width. Nowhere did it say larger. So whatever. My picture doesn't make any sense, but that doesn't really matter for ACT. Right? Because at least I know I'm talking about a rectangle. I'm keeping track of the lengths and the widths, and I'm labeling them correctly, and that's really what matters. Okay, so 48 times 3/4 is going to be 36. I'm going to write that again over here, just, it's a little busy there on the other side. Okay, let's do it right for C. Rectangle C has a length and width that are both 3/4 times the length and width of rectangle B. Okay, and multiplying by 3/4 definitely is going to make that rectangle smaller. So let's do a really small rectangle here for C. That makes more sense. But again, it doesn't really matter. As long as we're keeping track of the lengths and the widths, we just need to multiply times 3/4. And then for the width, I need to do times 3/4. And 36 times 3/4 is going to be 27 for the width and 36 for the length. Okay, cool. Now what? What is the perimeter of rectangle C? Okay, so rectangle C, that just means that I need to add up all of the lengths and widths. So 36 times 2 plus 27 times 2 is 126 is the perimeter. Boom. Nice. Okay, B. B shows up on a bunch of ACT packets. And it has to do with, it's always going to have to do with like two lights flashing at the same time. Or sometimes the context of the problem will be someone who has two different events going on. They go to piano practice every 3 days, and they go to football practice every 2 days. And you know, when's the first day of the week that they're going to go to both practices on the same day, right? It's talking about two things and when do they happen at the same time. And there's different ways to do this. Honestly, the fastest way is this is just a least common multiple problem. What's the least common multiple of the two intervals that it gives you? But if that's not something you're super comfortable with, right? Because ACT tests you on a bunch of stuff all at once. What happens if least common multiple doesn't dawn on you? And what if you're not super comfortable with finding the least common multiple? So I want to give you a strategy for that. So two warning signs begin flashing at the same time. Okay, so this is warning sign A, warning sign B, that doesn't really matter. But they both flash at the same time. One sign flashes every 3 seconds. So I'm going to make a timeline. I'm going to count 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3, and that first sign flashes. 1, 2, 3, and that first sign flashes. 1, 2, 3, flash. 1, 2, 3, flash. Okay, so I did a couple of those. The other sign flashes every 8 seconds. Okay, well, I'm going to do the same thing, and I'm just going to count every 8 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 is right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I could keep going if I needed to. How many seconds elapse from the moment the two signs flash at the same time? So that was right here. They both flash at the same time. How many seconds elapse from then until they flash at the same time? So I just need to keep doing this pattern until I see that they flash at the same time. So the top one's every 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, oh, and I just got lucky. I ended right when they flash at the same time. So then I just have to figure out how many seconds that was. Well, this is 8. 8 more is 16. 8 more is 24. So 24 seconds, which is also the least common multiple of 3 and 8. So that's a nice little strategy to solve problems like that. Have